Okay, I can see lots of different people coming in, so we'll go ahead and get this going so that we can have lots of times with our panelists today. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining. My name is Gretchen Myron. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as a Director of Inclusion here at the NCAA. Thank you so much for joining our 2022 NCAA Inclusion Forum. We're glad you're here for an opportunity to learn more about the trans and non-binary student-athlete experience and how to support all students on your campus. As many of you have likely seen, there's been an increased conversation in our society around trans and non-binary athletes' participation in sports over the last few years. There are varying opinions on this topic, and unfortunately, many discussions can frequently be reduced to hurtful rhetoric and assumptions. So as campuses work to support all student athletes, it's important to provide opportunities for productive conversations and dialogue to occur. Hearing about the lived experience of trans or non-binary student athletes is one way to better understand their perspectives and help introduce productive conversations on campus that can lead to more inclusive environments for all. As a reminder, this session will not go into detail on the NCAA's transgender student athlete participation policy, but more information on that policy can be found on our website, ncaa.org/transgender. Today, we are thrilled to have three incredible individuals to help talk to us about this topic and to help guide your continued conversations around these issues on campus. Our first speaker today is going to be Skylar Balar, an educator, author, advocate, and the first openly trans athlete on a Division I men's team. Skylar's story has appeared in several media stories, and his tireless advocacy has earned him numerous honors, including LGBTQ Nation's Instagram Advocate for 2020. In 2021, Skylar also released his first middle school grade novel. In 2022, Skylar created lanechanger.com, making gender literacy education accessible to every team, school, and company. He's also a new member of the NCAA's Common Ground leadership team. We are also thrilled to have Rear Admiral Bill Kelly, Superintendent of the United States Coast Guard Academy, joining us today. Rear Admiral Kelly has led the Coast Guard Academy since 2019, overseeing the Academy's recruitment, education, development, graduation, and commissioning of cadets as officers in the Coast Guard. Outside of all of his duties at the Coast Guard Academy, he also serves as a member of the NCAA Minority Opportunities and Interest Committee. Finally, we are pleased to also include Miriam Merrill, Director of Athletics at Pomona Pitzer Colleges. Miriam joined Pomona Pitzer as the Director of Athletics and Chair of Physical Education in July of 2020. She previously served Hamilton College as the Associate Director of Athletics and Senior Woman Administrator, in addition to several other roles that she held in athletics. Miriam is also a member of the NCAA Committee on Women's Athletics. Thank you so much to our three speakers for being with us today. You'll be able to submit questions to our panelists throughout this session using the Q&A feature. With that, I'll turn it over to Skylar to get the session started. Skylar?
Thank you so much, Gretchen. I am really excited to be here with you all today. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here to listen. I, like Gretchen said, am going to share more about the humanity of this issue. I think a lot of people have heard about trans athletes. We've seen lots of really dangerous and difficult rhetoric about trans athletes, but we don't often hear about who trans athletes actually are. So that's what we're gonna do today. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes telling you about my story, where I come from, who I am. But what I really want to do is engage in conversation, and we're going to do that later with a couple of these amazing administrators who are here, and then we're going to open it up for questions with you all. So get your questions ready, but hang on to them for about 15 minutes while I share my story with you all. So my name is Skylar. I use he, him pronouns. I have been swimming my entire life. So many of you all who are also athletes, I'm assuming you've been doing your sports for a long time. I literally learned how to swim around the age of 10 months old. So I've been swimming since before I could remember. I got good at swimming around the age of 9 or 10, not particularly good at swimming. This is a 16th place plaque. So I was not winning anything just yet. I was far more concerned with my super cool Justin Bieber haircut, the oversized Hawaiian shirt that I was wearing, and these glasses that I'm not sure if you've seen them before, but these glasses, when you go outside, they turn into sunglasses, which I thought was wicked cool. And I wore these glasses everywhere, of course, would always sit right next to the window to see if they change color. But yeah, those were my favorite things ever. I also dressed up for Halloween. So this was a Halloween costume one year when I decided I was going to be a punk rock star. Thought that all punk rock stars looked like this, with dog chains of the dog that I did not have, and mohawks. This mohawk is made out of Elmer's glue. Yeah, real Elmer's glue. And it was the kind that was glittery and sparkly and had little golden stars on it. So if you looked really closely, I had a bit of a star-spangled mohawk, which is really punk rock, if you ask me. I have a younger brother. His name is Jinwan. This is him in the water mohawk. There's no Elmer's glue in this, much to my mother's happiness. We grew up doing everything together. My brother, though, despite the fact that he's younger than me, he is 6'4" and about 250 pounds. In case you can't tell, I know I look huge on the Zoom screen. I am neither of those things. 5'8", nowhere near 250 pounds. So he's always been the one to carry me around. That's him in the orange. We grew up doing everything together, wearing fun hats, fun shoes, going hiking, getting muddy together. We were inseparable as kids. Water sports, again, a really big part of my life, whether actually being in the water or screaming and jumping into the water. To be honest, I don't know what I was trying to accomplish in these photos, but I had fun doing it, and not much else matters. This is a yoga pose. It's called a peacock. I've done it pretty much everywhere I've traveled growing up. And I would like to point out, though, these pants. The pants are these khaki pants. They zip off at the knee and they become shorts. I don't know if anybody told you, but they make you super cool in middle school. I'm totally joking. They don't, but I thought they did, so I wore them all the time. Skateboarded and rollerbladed a lot as a kid as well. If you'll notice, though, I'm wearing quite literally every single type of padding known to man, including underneath my cargo shorts, there are also butt pads. Those would be courtesy of my mother, who thought that I was going to break my butt. I never did, so I suppose that worked. When I got to high school, though, a lot of things for me changed. The number one thing that shifted was I decided I needed to fit in. And for me, fitting in meant looking like a girl. So, as Gretchen said, I am transgender. At birth, I was assigned female. That means everybody said, you're a girl. So I grew up thinking I was a girl. I was supposed to be one, right? So therefore I was one. But I never really acted like the other girls. I didn't dress like they did. I didn't really feel comfortable being around them or being grouped with them. And so I kind of did my own thing, and I dressed the way I felt most comfortable. That wound up being in a very stereotypically boyish or masculine sense. I played with most of the boys instead. I played boys soccer, boys baseball, boys lacrosse. And I think in a lot of ways that was beautiful and totally fine, but I was bullied constantly for looking different, for acting different, for never being girl enough. And I think middle school is a difficult time for most folks, but for me, there was this added layer of gender. I was never girl enough to be considered a real girl. So the girls would tell me that, Skylar, you're not a real girl. You can't play with us. The boys would be like, well, Skylar, you're not a real boy, so you can't play with us. So that's stuck in between. And this was quite difficult for me, especially with regards to bathrooms. I used the girls' bathroom because that's what I was told to do. And I was thrown out of every single girls' bathroom that I entered. It was always, what are you doing here? This is the girls' bathroom. No boys in here. You look like a boy. Get out. And they'd yell at me and throw me out of the bathroom. And that got so stressful that I would run from one end of the school to the other end to find the single stalled teachers only bathroom, because it was a single stall. Nobody else would be in there with me. And so I figured it was better to risk getting in trouble for using the teacher's bathroom than it was to get yelled at by all the girls at school. So when I got to high school, I thought, new building, new people, new teachers. What can I do to stop getting thrown out of the bathrooms? What can I do to fit in? I thought maybe if I look like this woman, everybody says that I am, maybe I'll be okay. So I grew my hair out long and I stopped cutting it short. I began wearing girls' clothes for the first time in my life. I thought girls were supposed to wear makeup, so I wore makeup twice. I wore high heels, also the same 2 times that I wore makeup, but I looked the part. So this is me in high school. Same watch, actually, that I carried around in my backpack. The blur doesn't like it, though. This is me at my high school prom, the second time I was wearing makeup. At the time in high school, I was getting a 4.0 GPA. I was getting recruited to swim for Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Columbia, and Princeton. We were making national records on my swim team at the time. We were national champions 3 years in a row. I was swimming faster than I'd ever swum before. I got my Harvard acceptance letter. I was all set and ready to go to Harvard the next year to swim there as well. A dream come true. I had actually come out as gay. I knew I liked girls. I thought maybe that's the thing that's different about me. Maybe if I tell people that, then I'll feel more like I belonged. I was dating a girl I really liked at the time. Everything seemed to be going for me. But for most of high school, and especially in these photos that I'm sharing with you right now, I was miserable. I felt so sad, so lost, so disconnected from myself all the time. And instead of taking a pause and figuring out what that meant, I was like, you know what? I'm getting all these A pluses and all of these good grades, and I'm winning all these gold medals in the pool. What does it matter if I'm miserable? But it did matter. And over time, my mental health began to suffer. And halfway through my high school career, I broke my back. In a biking accident, I fractured 3 vertebrae, and that took from me my number one vice, my number one passion and pastime, swimming. And for an extra 20 hours a week that I was usually under the water training, now I was doing nothing. And it was in that emptiness that my mental health deteriorated. I began struggling with depression, with an eating disorder, with self-harm. And I always like to take a pause here and remind you that if you or somebody that you know is struggling with mental health or something similar to that, maybe it's bipolar, maybe it's OCD, maybe it's depression, maybe it's an eating disorder too, that's time to get help. You should never have to do that alone. It's something to reach out for help about. So that's actually what I did. I began to see a therapist with my parents' support, which I was quite fortunate to have, and trying to work on what was happening. But by the end of my high school career, I really hadn't gotten all that much better. I was really, really struggling. And so I actually was encouraged by a therapist to go to a residential treatment center. Despite the fact that I was terrified of taking a gap year, putting everything on hold to go to this rehab center, essentially, I decided that I would do it. I went to a place in Miami, Florida, because I was so miserable. I had no idea what else to do. And they said, you need to go to rehab. I said, okay, I'll try. And I spent 131 days at this rehab center, a specific place for eating disorders. 131 days is about 5 months. So it was a good chunk of time that I was at here doing therapy, trying to figure myself out. And it was there in that pause that I'd really never taken before. I was able to finally discover and then say, I am transgender. And initially that came with a lot of relief. It explained a lot about my childhood, a lot about why I never quite fit in, a lot about why bathrooms were so difficult, my gender was so confusing to me. But you have to remember that I am an athlete. And I have been recruited to swim for Harvard women's swim team. And you all know this, but gender is quite important in sports. So when I figured out that I was trans, the relief was very short-lived and terror very quickly ensued because I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do about swimming? This is a really important part of the story, and I'm going to try to give you as many details as possible here. But essentially what I did is I told my coach. My coach who had recruited me for the women's team. I was very afraid to tell her, but I said, you know what? I have to take this risk to be myself, and maybe I'll lose her. Maybe I'll lose Harvard. Maybe I'll lose swimming. I don't know, but I need to be myself. So I said, Steph, coach, I'm transgender. What do I do? And that conversation was actually quite beautiful because she had said, Skylar, I don't know anything about trans people, and I don't know what to do. And I don't really know actually trans people in general. I think you're probably the first trans person I know that I've met, but let's figure this out together. And so we did. We began stumbling through it together. And she talked to the men's coach. The men's coach offered me a spot on the men's team. That was of his own accord. I was very lucky that Kevin, the men's coach at Harvard, had taken a class on gender diversity, and he was already versed in sort of gender literacy, if you will. It was quite amazing. And he said, well, if Skylar identifies as male, wants to swim here, and wants to swim here at Harvard, why doesn't he swim for me? I coach the men's swim team at Harvard. And that sounds simple, right? It sounds logical. But if you think about the socio-political climate of this country, and then you think about the fact that this man, Kevin, had never previously interacted with a transgender athlete before, and he's like, sure, bring the trans kid. It's pretty amazing. I will share, though, that when they brought that option to me, they said, Skylar, you get to choose. What team do you want to swim for? I initially said no to the men's team. I said, please keep me on the women's team. I was too scared to give up everything that I felt like I had worked for. Remember, I've been learning how to swim since I was 10 months old. I've been training since I was 6. I've been training year round since I was 8. I've been training at 4 a.m. so I could do the two a day practices before and after school. By the time I was 10, 20 hours a week by the time I was 12. My whole life, I have been working so hard to be so good at swimming on the women's team. And it was really frightening to say, hey, let me not do that and let me swim on the men's team now and kind of get rid of the possibility of being this woman champion, right? It also was really scary to try to do something somebody else had never done before. There was no blueprint for it. There was nobody I could ask for advice who had done this. So initially I declined the men's team, and it took me a lot of thinking. Here's a photo of me thinking. You'll notice that my glasses have turned into sunglasses too. They have transitioned, but all puns aside, I thought deeply about this time because I really had to weigh, do I want this numerical success, right? Of potentially being a champion on the women's side, or do I want to take the risk to throw this all away potentially and just be me? Is that worth it? And it came down for me particularly, and it's different for different trans people, but for me, it came down to recognizing that all of these accolades that I had already gotten, the national team, the national championships that we've been to, the national records we'd set, the getting recruited to Harvard, all of those things had actually not filled me up. That I was in a treatment center, rehab for mental illness, feeling pretty suicidal at the time. That those accolades didn't actually protect me from misery because I wasn't really being me. And so in the end, I had a conversation with the women's coach who was kind of carrying me through all of this. And she said, Skylar, you know what you want. And the reality is you're standing at the edge of a cliff and you actually have a safety harness on. And you just need to jump. We're here. We've got you. Just take that risk for yourself. Your heart knows what it wants. We're waiting for your mind to catch up. And she was right. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to take that jump and take that risk to do this for myself. So I did. So that's me competing in my first meet on the men's team. And before it began, we all walk out one at a time. They throw your name up on the Jumbotron, your photo, your hometown, your stroke. It's a really cool welcome onto Harvard Men's Swim and Dive. But they're walking at us out one at a time in alphabetical order of last name. So my last name begins with B, which meant that I was first, which also meant that I was completely alone. So I was walking out in front of my first, for my first college meet all by myself, and I was panicking. Not only is it my first college meet, so my parents and my friends are there. The news is also there because the whole first trans athlete thing, I've got camera crews on me. So I'm feeling a little bit of pressure. It's also my first meet competing after a 2-year break. And I had never taken more than 2 months from competition. And any of you all who are endurance athletes as well, perhaps you're a swimmer as well, or a runner or a rower, you know that 2 years is a very long time to take out of sport. Right. So I was so afraid of my athletic ability. And then lastly, and most importantly, this was my first meet competing against other men. And everybody had said that I couldn't do it. There was no way a trans athlete, a trans guy like me was going to be able to keep up with, much less beat other men. So I felt like I had a lot to prove. And I was very afraid that maybe I couldn't prove it. So we're standing there at the edge of the pool, and the rest of my teammates have now joined me. We're all standing there together, and they're getting ready to play the national anthem. And I'm feeling like everything is so new and so different, and I'm so nervous as a result. But as I stand there, and the national anthem begins to play, and it's off key as always, I'm watching, and I'm like, wait a second. This is the same thing I've been doing since I was a little kid. The same 25-yard pool that's going to take me 6 strokes of breaststroke to cross, the same 25, 100-yard race eventually that I'm going to be able to do in this meet. It's the same 6 strokes of breaststroke that are going to take me across the pool. The same take your mark, boop, that's going to go off when I dive in. The same flags above the lanes. It's the same. And I'm standing there with all of my teammates around me. The national anthem is just starting to play. And I go to do my pre-meet ritual. And I don't know if any of you are athletes as well. I'm assuming many of you are. If you're an athlete, maybe you also have a pre-meet ritual. For me, I put my hand over my heart, like a lot of people do, but there's straps on either side, right? And I would put my thumb on one side of that strap like this and my 4 fingers on the other before every single meet. The straps are a part of the women's suit. Right? And that was my pre-meet ritual. I always did that. My fingers, one side of that strap, the other side. But I'm at this meet, no longer wearing the women's suit. And the national anthem is playing, so I go to do my pre-meet ritual. And I'm like, no strap. And then in that moment, I realized that while everything is the same, it's also different. Because for the first time in my life, I'm competing as just me, as just myself. There isn't all this baggage of who I thought I had to be, who I thought I was supposed to be, who everybody else told me I was. I was just me. And that's really why I share my story with you all today, or with any audience ever. It's to prove that possibility, that you can be exactly who you are, whatever that means to you, whether that means LGBTQ plus, trans, queer, gay, bisexual, pansexual, etc. But maybe it's not that, right? Maybe it's something different from that. You can be that. You can hold that identity and also pursue your passions. So that's really the background I wanted to give you all. We're going to do a quick just review of language. I'm going to tell you 6 words. It'll be pretty quick, just to make sure we're all on the same page with language, because I think we need to start with the most inclusive, most respectful language in order to have these more difficult conversations. And conversations about trans athletes are probably some of the most heated with regards to trans people. So we're going to run through some vocab just to make sure we're all on the same page, and then we'll open it up for questions. Well, first I'm going to show you some mostly naked photos of myself. This is a photo of me from the Harvard pool, my first year. And this is a photo of me at the end of my first year. My top surgery scars on my chest right here. Some people think they look like a shark bite. If you think it looks like a shark bite, you're welcome to think that I'm far more gnarly than I actually am, but it's truly not a shark bite. This is me and the rest of my teammates. I'm in the middle right here with the bucket. And this is the end of my swim career. So this is in 2019. My last year, 18-year-long swim career came to a close at this meet in February of 2019. And it was a really beautiful experience with the rest of my teammates. But like I said, vocab. So the first word is one I hope you've gotten a little bit of an idea of as we've been talking, or as I've been talking at you: transgender. Okay. But for definition's sake, I'm going to define it for you. Transgender is an adjective that describes people who do not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. Okay. When you're born, you get a birth certificate. It says M or F on it. If you don't identify with what was put there at birth, that makes you transgender. Okay. If you do identify with what was put there at birth, that makes you cisgender. It's really important to recognize both of these words are adjectives, so we use them to describe a noun. The reason I'm telling you all this is not because I'm trying to be like a grammar nerd or something like that, but it's if you use them incorrectly, you're going to imply something negative and probably wrong about the person. So people will say, oh, Skylar is a transgender. A transgender what? A transgender person, a transgender man, a transgender swimmer. But when we remove man, swimmer, and person, then we dehumanize me. I become just a label. So make sure that we use it as an adjective. Skylar is transgender, or Skylar is a transgender man. Also, there's no such thing as transgendered. They'll say Skylar's transgendered. That implies that something happened to me to make me the way that I am. Nothing happened to me to make me trans the same way that nothing happened to you to make you cis. So we don't have cisgendered either. Okay. People will say Skylar transgendered 8 years ago, and they'll use it as a verb. Skylar did not transgender 8 years ago. He transitioned 8 years ago. So transgender is the identity. There's no act required to be transgender. And transition is an act that some trans people take, right? So I transition, for example. A transition is any steps a person takes to affirm their gender identity. This is purposefully vague. There is no one way to transition. There is no one transition. And everybody who transitions should have the agency to define their transitions for themselves. It could include pronoun changes, wardrobe changes, hormones, surgery, but can also not include any of these things. You've got to let the person transitioning define what their transition means for themselves. Gender identity is an arrow pointing inwards. It's who I am, my internal sense of my own gender. It does not have to match sex or the next word on this list. Biological sex is another way people put this, but for most people it does, right? Because most people aren't trans, and that's why I'm here to talk to you all today. Sex is on this list. Sex usually refers to anatomy, right? The parts that we have, the physiology that we have. But a lot of people think that sex is binary, that people are either biologically male or biologically female. And the reality is that's biologically false. Biology is really complicated. And people say, well, Skylar, it's basic biology. Well, basic biology doesn't really cut it, because the science of biological sex is actually quite complicated. And there's not one way we define biological sex either. There's about 5 main components, and they sometimes go in these neat little buckets of classically male and classically female, but they don't always do. And it's really important to notice that and to know that. Last word is gender expression. This is how we present or communicate our genders. Gender expression is things that like how we act, how we look, how we talk, mannerisms that we have, and it was 100% a social construct. It is what society has deemed as of a man or of a woman as masculine and feminine, and it changes over culture, over time period, over location that you live. For example, thousands of years ago in Korea, it was very common to see men wearing dresses. But in this day, age, culture, and epoch, it's far more common to see women wearing dresses. But that doesn't mean that if I, as a man, me, Skylar, put a dress on, I don't become a woman. I'm still me, Skylar, a man. wearing a dress, something society considers feminine. So these things are gendered, it's about expression, but it's really what society has literally arbitrarily decided goes in these boxes, and it's just a construct. Yes, a lot of people like their expression to match their identity, but it doesn't have to. Okay. I'm going to exit the screen share actually so that I can see all faces of the folks we're going to bring up. We're going to bring back Miriam, Merrill, and Admiral Bill Kelly. We're going to do some Q&A from them first, and then we're going to open up for questions for you all. So if you have questions, I see one already come through, but if you all have other questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I think I see a couple people chatting into the chat, and that's also fine. But if you have questions, let's put them in the Q&A box so that we can just see them more easily that way. Okay, awesome. Miriam, Merrill, and Admiral Bill Kelly, would you also introduce yourselves really quickly and let us know what you prefer to be called? Because I don't know if you'd like to be called Merrill, Admiral Kelly, what have you. So please let me know.
Skylar, thanks so much, and I will I'll take the reins from you. First and foremost, Skylar, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You started right up front that the humanity of this topic is so important, and you did a great job of capturing that in a very brief but powerful presentation. So thank you for doing that. I think we all want to know how you got the Elmer's glue out of your hair, but we can put that question and that answer in the chat box. If it's appropriate, I would go by Admiral Bill Kelly. I'm the superintendent of the United States Coast Guard Academy up here in New London, Connecticut. Miriam?
Sure. And Miriam, Merrill, folks call me Dr. Merrill, but you can certainly call me Miriam. She, her, my pronouns.
Great. Thanks, Miriam. And to get it started, we do have a couple questions, but we welcome your questions in the Q&A block, and we will try to get to those. We will do our best to get to those at the end. But the first question we had teed up from previous work: if a student athlete comes out to a coach or administrator as trans or non-binary, what are some next steps that administrators and departments can take to be supportive and to begin to navigate any questions with the team? And Skylar, you talked about that, your experiences right off the bat there at Harvard. Is there anything you want to add to that? And then we can go to Miriam.
Yeah, so I think one of the best things to do is sort of like two sides of this coin, if you will. The first is that you want to let the athlete lead, I think, as much as possible. Give them the space to tell you what they need, while also creating systems that make it so that they don't have to teach you everything. And I think my experience was unique in some ways because I was the first at Harvard and I was the first in D1 sports. And so I had to take some time to educate people, and we all kind of needed to educate ourselves. We were stumbling along the way. But my hope is that because I've done that, there's more space now to see, hey, this is what we've done. For example, we had people in the administration who were trained on gender diversity, right? Kevin had taken a course on gender diversity, and that was huge. He didn't do that because of me. He did that serendipitously, but it made him such a better administrator and coach for me because I didn't have to teach him any of the language. I never had to correct his language, which is huge. The next thing is that he asked me, he knew bathrooms were a potential conflict point. He said, which bathroom do you want to use? Do you want to use the men's bathroom? Do you want to use the women's bathroom? What do you prefer? Because it's up to you. At Harvard, we don't have gender neutral bathrooms in the locker room, specifically around the swim place. So he said, if you aren't comfortable using either of those, then I have my office. You can use my office, and it locks, it closes. You can have that as your own space. If you ever need it, just tell me. And that was a great plan B, right? I had said I wanted to use the men's locker room, but he knew that locker rooms could be a stressor for trans people. And he said, here's another option in case you need it. I never used it, but it was really good psychologically to have that as a backup, right? And so there's kind of like marrying the two of like letting me lead by saying, here, you have the space to decide what you need, but also here are some resources that I can provide you. He said, I know, trans people experience violence. Here's my phone number. Call me anytime if you need something. Every time we had little coach check-ins, which all the athletes did, he made sure to ask, how are things with the team, and how are things going, at home? How are things going with your partner? Like he always asked questions and made space for me to talk about work. I also was working at the time. I did this kind of education all throughout college, and he'd make sure to make space for that as well. So I think it's, again, a little bit of both, letting the athlete lead by saying, hey, make space for what you need and be assertive if you can. But if you can't, here are some structures in place to help you. I think in terms of team atmosphere, the best thing Kevin did was he made sure that everybody knew that I was going to be there. And that was something that we talked about as well, so that I wasn't being outed to the team, right? It was agreed upon that everybody would know that I was trans. And he told them, and he said, hey, this is what we're going to do. Do people have concerns? Do people have questions? Do we need to have anything else happen? And the team said, no, I think we're good. And he had that structure in place, though. Had anybody needed to voice concern or needed to take anything, to him, they brought it to him instead of putting it on me. And that was really important as well. So I could keep going, but those are some main points that I want to share.
Great. Thanks, Skylar. Miriam, how about over to you?
Sure. Yeah, those are some really great suggestions, Skylar, and I certainly echo those. One of the things I'll just underscore is your conversation about choice, right? That's really important, that we are providing choice, whether a student wants to transition socially or medically, right? Giving those options and then giving kind of, here's what the options that fall underneath those two categories, I think is really important. One other thing that I just want to share too is doing the work, right? So even though right now in our athletic department, we don't have anyone who identifies as transgender, it is really important that we are creating a community of welcome, community of inclusion. One of the examples I'll give is part of our kind of compliance paperwork that everybody has to do before they're certified is allied training, work, and inclusion. So all of our student athletes go over to our Career Resource Center to do work. And oftentimes it's the first time they've been in that center. And there's conversations that happen around, trans, gender, non-binary, all of that. So that our students have a sense of what that means and that there is an opportunity for folks who want to come out and transition, that the conversation is already happening, right? And we don't have to start from square one. The last thing that I'll also mention too is for administrators, in the same way that we talk about representation matters, right? So being intentional about the hiring that we're doing in our departments. And while oftentimes it's really focused on whether it's male or female or person of color, right? Like making sure that we are addressing all of the salient identities that exist within our student athletes when it comes to representation and hiring.
Great.
I also just tack on to that I think it's so important to recognize that everybody has an experience with gender, right? And when we think about trans people, I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't have a trans athlete on my team or at my school, so I don't need to know about this. And that would be wrong. You do need to know about this, not because it's a global conversation right now, and you should be adept in having these conversations, but also because you also have an experience with gender. And people think that trans people are some kind of other in a category over there, but the reality is we all have an experience with gender, and we all have an experience with different parts of our gender and how it interacts with sports. And in many ways, sports performances are including gender because sports are a gendered sports are a gendered performance, right? And I think it's important to recognize that if you're sitting here in Washington, it's being like, okay, great, this is great for Harvard to do because they have Skylar, or for Penn to do because they had Leah. Yes, and it's also great for anybody who doesn't have a trans athlete, not only because you want to make it welcoming for somebody who comes in, but also because all those athletes will benefit from having more gender training and more ability to talk about their own experiences in gender, because they'll be better athletes as a result, because they'll understand themselves better. And we know that when people understand themselves better, when they can come as their whole selves, whatever that means to them, they actually perform better in sports. So it's a really good athletic decision as well.
Great. Thanks, Skylar. The both of you covered everything that I had on my notes to cover. So let me kick it back over to Miriam for our next question.
Yeah. So over the last few years, in particular, there seems to be more national conversation around trans and non-binary athletes that has often resulted in hurtful or stereotypical headlines. How can constructive dialogue occur on campus to share and talk through different students' feelings without getting into the hurtful rhetoric that we have seen in our spaces? So I'll go ahead and start with Skylar and then kick it over to Admiral Kelly.
Yeah. I would start with something that I think sounds basic, but I'm going to say it anyways. We need to make sure that we're listening to the facts and we are finding the facts, because a lot of times right now there's a good amount of sensationalized media titles, media releases, things that people are saying. We follow people on Twitter or TikTok or what have you that are just lying. And some people don't even know that they're lying. They don't even know that what they're putting out is completely false information, but that is what's happening. And the amount of times I've seen complete lies being spread about Leah, for example, or about Pound Fox, or about other trans women specifically who are women athletes, it's really disheartening sometimes to see the amount of lies and propaganda that's out there. So the first thing I encourage people to do when they're having these conversations is make sure they're actually speaking from the facts, because they might be perpetuating complete propaganda. And I don't mean small things like, oh, this is dark gray and not black. I mean, like, this is a car and it's a phone, right? Where I'm talking about like categorically different things. People are making big sweeping statements that are just lies, and they're building off each other. So the first thing I say is make sure you have the facts. And if you don't have the facts, that's okay, but find them, or find somebody who does, or don't put your opinion out there if you don't have all the facts. A lot of people will say, well, I don't know all these things, but I feel this way. And that's fine. You can feel however you feel, but I'll strongly encourage you to recognize that those feelings didn't come from no one. We all live in a transphobic, misogynistic world. And when we put those two things together and add white supremacy into it, those are a lot of really big systems of oppression that we all are ingrained in. And so when those things are there, we're going to have feelings that are knee-jerk responses to things that are probably not accurate, that are not facts. You can feel however you'd like to feel. And I will never tell somebody you shouldn't feel that, because I can't tell you how you feel, right? If you're sad and I say, don't feel sad, that never fixes anything. But I can say, maybe we need to dissect why you feel sad. Maybe we need to unpack the things that are adding to that feeling, because that experience is valid in itself, but the actions that you draw from those feelings, for example, speaking your opinion in some moments or sharing certain facts that are not facts, those might not be valid. And it's really important to recognize feelings are not always facts. And if we're going to talk about these things, we need to start with what actually are the facts, and then make sure we're listening to experts in the field as well.
Great. Thanks, Skylar. Just a couple thoughts from my end. And Miriam, thanks for that question. I think leaders have the responsibility to establish that inclusive environment on their campuses, at their units, if you're in the Coast Guard, wherever it may be. And so for us, whether it's a superintendent, the president of a college, an administrator, a director, a coach, a captain, they own the responsibility to make sure it's an inclusive environment. Whereas, as Skylar said, and this is the thing I really think is so important across the board as we talk about inclusion and equity, we want folks showing up as their best self. You want your team showing up as its best self. You need the United States Coast Guard to show up its best self. We need our folks to show up as their best self day in and day out. And the most, I think the thing in this arena that resonated for me and really helped me move forward as a leader was I heard our commandant say, if a young woman or man desires to serve in the United States Coast Guard and they meet all of the requirements, then they will have a place in our service. And that set the vision very clear for me. There was no wavering. There was no, maybe this, maybe that. It was clear, and the direction was clear. And then we needed to obviously work from there, and as attend forums like this and learn from student athletes like Skylar about who we're working with, who we need to serve, so that they truly can show up as their best self. But I would just say to those leaders that are on the call, and we're all leaders, we have a responsibility for setting the climate that allows everyone to show up as their best self. And if we do that, your unit, your team, your institution is going to be all that much better for it. And our nation will be better for it as a whole. So thank you.
Yeah, the great points. And I think the last thing that I'll add is to create a culture to repair harm when it happens. So one of the things that we are very intentional about is restorative justice on our campus, and particularly in our athletic department, so that, when things arise, that we can have a space where people can be heard, acknowledge harm, and repair harm, right? Because when harm does happen, it is really important for us as administrators to provide a space to repair harm. So I think in addition to that, that's one thing that I would think about setting up so that you have a space to repair harm.
Great. Thanks, Miriam. And Gretchen, I'll ask you to chime in if there's some questions there that you think we should go to, but I'll go with this one. Some people may have not met a trans or non-binary person before. What are some ways to introduce others to their perspectives without requiring a trans or binary person to continually share their story and possibly be subject to more emotional labor? And Skylar, you did a great job of telling your story, but I'm certain the first time you told that story, you may not have told it with the same eloquence that you did today.
Yeah. It's a really good question. So the question that I'm hearing is we want, and this, I think allies ask this question in many different ways, and I want to put it in this way. People will say, okay, Skylar, so you're telling me that I need to listen to the perspectives of trans people and queer people, and I need to hear, the perspectives of trans student athletes. But then also I've been told that I shouldn't always ask trans people and, non-binary people all these questions, because then I'm putting the emotional labor on them. So like, what do? I'm told I want to know their opinion, but I'm not supposed to ask questions. So kind of stuck in the middle. And I say, okay, I understand. You ask the people who provide the labor, right? And there are people out here that provide it, right? You shouldn't be just going, we can put this into any context, right? If you want to learn about anti-Asian violence, you shouldn't just ask any random Asian person who is on the street, oh, you look Asian, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you and put the emotional labor on. You should go to the resources that are teaching about deconstructing anti-Asian sentiments in the country. Same goes with other marginalized groups. So I've made this my job. This is what I do full time. I've actually created a whole online learning platform. It's called lanechanger.com. And you can go to LaneChanger and you can buy all of my trainings for a pretty reasonable price and learn them as your own time. It's 40 plus Q&A modules. We'll talk about it more at the end, but this is a resource that I wanted to put out there as soon as possible. It sounds like an ad, it kind of is, but the long story short is it's a resource. And I think we should be using resources. There are other ones out there too. I'm just sharing mine because I created it. But there's lots of resources out there that trans people have created so that you can learn about our experiences. I will say there's not a ton of people that have created trans athlete resources specifically, because there's not a whole lot of us right now. But there are many people who are creating resources about trans and non-binary students. So I will encourage you to do that research. You can also use mine. Gretchen just put it into the chat. Sorry, I put it to just hosted panelists, my bad. So that's one of the things that you all can use. And I strongly encourage you to have that as a resource for your student athletes as well. And you can buy licenses for like a whole school. Again, we'll talk more about that at the end. But I think you should be looking for the resources that exist, right? A lot of people get really lost and like, well, but who do I ask? You shouldn't be asking your random trans friend for this education. You should be asking the educators who are trans, right? Who do this work for a living. I will also encourage you, there's a website, maybe Gretchen, you can put in the chat. It's called transathlete.com. That's by Chris Mosier, who's the first openly transgender man to be on Team USA. And he's created a whole trans athlete resource page. And that's basically to stay up to date on the bills that are happening and policies that are great and all that kind of stuff. So he's another really great resource. But if you want to sit and like pretend to meet a trans person, I say pretend because I won't actually literally be there live, but my training is all me walking you through all of the common Q&A questions about trans people. And it is a way to meet people and to get people who didn't come here to meet me and to talk through this and to really have that humanity, because that's, like I started out with, is so important and what often gets lost in these trainings.
Yeah, and I think really quickly, I think I'll add some other resources, right? So there are podcasts out there. There's one called the Transporter Room. There are documentaries, right? So this just allows folks to really sit down and learn. So learning essentially shouldn't be an excuse, or having to put the emotional labor on trans and non-binary people shouldn't be the excuse, because there's all sorts of ways to learn.
Great. Thanks, Miriam. And I would just offer from my end, have the courage to jump in, no pun intended, Skylar, to the deep end of the pool, right? Have the courage to do the research, to listen and learn, to engage. I think, you can read books about all the athletic endeavors we like to participate in, but you have to engage in it. So to be an ally, engage with folks, learn, listen to the stories, ask those questions in a safe and respectful way, so that we're prepared as leaders, as individuals in our society to engage and support those, to get back to that concept of allowing everyone to show up as their best self. So I think Gretchen, if I could pivot just a little bit, Gretchen, we wanted to take the last 15 minutes for Q&A, so I'll maybe go to you at this point in time.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, everyone. We're getting awesome questions in the Q&A, so thank you for sending those in addition to the ones that we just went through. Skylar, the first question that we have is for you. We're getting a couple different questions if you are able to share some more information about your timeline for transitioning. So can you go into a little bit more about what that looked like for you and any differences that you had between the mental and physical changes that you decided to make as part of your transition process?
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing is I have a link that I can share with you about transition, and you can check that out. But do that, you can do that later. The long story short, let's see, timeline. So when I came, about a year after I came out, in that year, I pursued transitioning. And my timeline was very sped up in many ways for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I wanted to transition as quick as possible because I was going to start on the men's team. And I was frightened about what that meant. And I was like, I want to get ready to go. I want to be ready to be there. So that kind of sped up the process because I wanted to start, and it actually wasn't just athletically, I wanted to start college as myself. I wanted to be there at college as me. I didn't want to have to be dealing with all of these transitional things such as surgery or, pursuing doctor's support for things. I wanted that to be done when I started college. I don't think the process necessarily like transition is all done, but the logistics of which I wanted to have done. So that accelerated it. And then that was possible because I have privilege. And this was really, really important to note. I had the financial privilege of having my parents support me. I had the social support of having my parents support me, which meant that I could use their insurance and also that I had the insurance to pay then for these things. So I got top surgery first, which at the time was unusual. I had difficulty doing that, but I did. And I started top surgery first. And then 3 months later, I started testosterone. And that was my transition. I began college 3 months after I had started testosterone. So very little had changed at that time. But I had top surgery 6 months prior, and I felt on top of the world. In many ways, I felt so much more like myself. I was also still terrified of being on the men's team and what it meant to be pretty much naked in my swimsuit, just barely walking through my own transition. So it was definitely very frightening to do so. But I was me. I don't know what other intricacies we're looking for in these questions and sort of that timing, but I will say that financial privilege is a huge expedient in transition because we then can not have to wait for insurance to clear things, or don't have to save money to be able to pay for them, because a top surgery can cost almost $10,000 these days. Testosterone is a little bit more affordable, but for a lot of folks, having access to healthcare is a huge issue and a huge barrier for transitional resources, and it can compound with other intersectional identities. So Black and brown folks already have less access to healthcare and experience more medical discrimination for many different reasons, mostly white supremacy and racism. And so a lot of Black trans folks have extremely less access to healthcare, especially healthcare that's competent, that is kind, that's going to take care of somebody. And I know a lot of people, unfortunately, who are Black trans folks who have had a lot of issues and medical transphobia and racism. So that's really other parts of that. And what I want to add is that even despite my privilege, I still struggled and had medical transphobia. So I had an accelerated timeline, and still I cycled through 4 therapists before I found one that would say I could actually get top surgery. And that was really difficult for me at the time. And I have to highlight the fact that I had all of this privilege, and still I cycled through 4 therapists who said no. And I had the privilege of being able to then find another therapist and keep finding a therapist until one would actually sign my letter and say, yes, I believe you, you are who you are. And I've now since gone back to, and I actually do a lot of work in the therapy world these days. And I have had therapists that have now come back to me and said, gosh, I'm so sorry, I denied you that. If I knew what I knew now, if I had taken your training, Skylar, now I would have been able to affirm you then, but I didn't know any better. And at the time, the literature said X, Y, and Z. And so it said to deny you. And so I did. So it's been really healing to hear that. But I guess what I'm trying to highlight is that even with privilege, these things can be difficult. So imagine what it's like for people who don't have those privileges. And I want to highlight that especially.
Thanks, Skylar. That's such a great point about some of those different nuances with your journey. And we appreciate you mentioning the privileges that you held in order to make that, but still the barriers that you had to overcome too. One of the next questions that we have is talking a little bit more about some different on-campus support resources. So Skylar, you mentioned that you had come out to your coach prior to arriving on campus, but were there any different resources outside of athletics that were helpful to you on campus? And then after you answer, maybe we'll go to Miriam and Bill to see if you have any other resources that you would recommend that have been useful on your campus as well.
Yeah, actually, one of the most useful things that I had, there's 2 things that were really useful. One was the team and the athletic department, and making sure that they were really supportive. And so having them behind my back was amazing. The other thing that was really supportive was I found actually a trans masculine and trans men support group in Boston. And I got to meet a ton of other trans people like me. And that was honestly life-saving, like straight up life-saving, because I was able to find resonance. I was able to find family when things were difficult at school. or with my transition or what have you, I had people that just got it. I didn't have to explain anything. And I always encourage people to find that kind of community. And Harvard had an LGBTQ office. We're special and annoying, so we call it the BGLTQ office. But that was great, and I found support there as well. But I think for me, because I'd already found this trans masculine support group outside of college, that was more helpful to me. But I know that the administrators at school who were LGBTQ specific, because we had my freshman year, the RAs, they had specific LGBTQ plus ones. The same thing with the deans that lived in the dorms after that. And so I always had a point person to go to who I knew I could be, could be heard by, and then we could figure out if I needed anything else. But my experience at Harvard was honestly really good with regards to my transes. I never experienced anything that made me feel like I was othered because I was trans in an administrative sense, and with the professors, with my teachers, or anything. And I really can't say that about many other places, to be honest. And I don't say that just because I'm wearing the shirt. Like, I truly had this amazing experience with the administration there. And I think it's because people, first of all, there were systems in place, right? They had LGBTQ trained people. They had people trained with gender. And then they listened. When I said, this is what I need, they said, okay, sure. Let me figure out how we can meet your needs. And I'm sure that other trans people might have had different experiences at Harvard, so I can't speak for everybody. But for myself, I had a really amazing experience, very inclusive and easy experience with regards to the trans there.
That's great, Skylar. Miriam or Bill, anything on your campus that you think has been particularly useful for some of your different students or that you're thinking about for those other resources?
Sure, I'll just quickly throw out. So student affairs, absolutely. Our career resource center as well. I talked about kind of the partnership we had with them, but we had a conversation about like what we'll do, how we'll be intentional about it, right? All of those things I think have been really helpful.
And Gretchen, we just signed our transgender policy, the first one at any of the federal service academies, to support transgender cadets if they are on campus or want to join us in service. But one of the things I did in my previous job for the entire service was we ended up sending, and this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but we set up a coordination cell. We're the military, so we set up a coordination cell. But really, what that coordination cell was an array of folks that a member of the service could call into, a commanding officer, much like Skylar's coach, could call into. A shipmate, somebody who cares about someone else who was concerned about him, could call into. And on that cell was available to him legal counsel, medical counsel, policy counsel, just an array of folks that were there that would be able to help the member kind of walk through. How do I set up a transition plan? What does that look like? What kind of medical care am I entitled to as a member of the military? Chaplains were available to him, mental health counselors were available to him. So we're going to model that here on our institution. So when a transgender cadet comes forward, we're there to prepare. We're prepared to meet them where they're at and help them walk through their journey. And Skylar touched on it. Every transgender cadet that we have is going to have a little bit different desire with regards to their transition plan, their medical plan, what surgery they may or may not want to engage in. And so we want to meet each one of those individually and not think that there's just one standard way to support each and every member on our campus community, because there's not. Each and every one has to be dealt with and supported in a different way, but always in a respectful way. And we're really driving towards the goal of ensuring that everyone can earn their commission to serve in our United States Coast Guard. At the end of the day, that's our commitment. So thank you.
That's great. Good example. Thank you so much for sharing that too. We have a couple other questions that are coming in. So thank you again to our audience for submitting them. Skylar, this one is for you in particular. Someone mentions that they know you have a very large social media following, and we mentioned that in your bio. Can you talk about some of the pros and cons that you found by using this method to support trans athletes? And certainly you've kind of alluded to some of that with the different media attention you've had over the last year as well.
Yeah, I have a complicated relationship with social media. I think a lot of people do. It's one of my jobs, and I will just say that up front. I treat social media like a job because for me it is. And the reason I say that and answer the question is that helps me deal with a lot of the hatred that I get. I get pretty, daily death threats, messages for me to kill myself, horrible things that are about me that people say. So that happens every day. And I say it casually because it has become casual to me. I don't wish that anybody had to deal with this, but I do know that it comes with the job. And I've learned over the years that I've done this, and you don't have to be, by the way, a trans public figure in order to get this. I think most trans people who have any kind of account online will receive this kind of hatred, because this happened to me when I had like 200 followers. And it happens to me now that I have, 300,000, whatever. So we learn this over time. I think most marginalized people learn how to hold these things, and most specifically we learn how to let them go. And what I've learned about what other people say, or what I've learned when other people say the things that they do, is that it's actually not about me. That people have a lot of projections going on, a lot of their own insecurities, that my transness can make them feel less in their manhood or whatever, and that's not about me. They will put it on me. Right? And they will tell me that horrible things about myself, or tell me to kill myself, or tell me they want to kill me, whatever. And I say, wow, like this is literally my response. The other day I got a message that was just like, hey, I'm not going to even repeat it, but it was very, very violent and graphically violent. And I read it and I thought, oh my God, this person must be miserable. If this is what they're doing, to pull out their phone, find my Instagram, message me this horrible thing, they must be miserable. I feel bad for them. And I didn't do anything with the message. I deleted it and I moved on. But I have learned to have that response. And I think it's productive in many ways. But mostly it's productive for me not to take that pain onto myself and to internalize it. And so what I always encourage others, and it doesn't really matter who you are, but especially if you're another marginalized person, a trans athlete, when people speak negatively about us, understand that it reflects their character and not. And I think it's so important to remember that. And it's something that I hold on to deeply, because I pretty much experience that on a daily basis. And I know, again, a lot of marginalized people experience that. And I get a fraction of some of the hatred that other people do, who are even more visible than I am. And it's something that I think at the same time, this is the other side of the coin. It devastates me. It's very sad that this is kind of the world that we're living in, that these comments are so common that I don't feel anything anymore. Right? That's pretty horrible. And so it also brings me the resolve to keep moving forwards and to keep making sure that we're making change, that we're fighting against these things, because it doesn't really matter what your view is on sports or on trans people. You should never be speaking to me the way that people do on this, right? Or even sometimes in real life. So to me, it's all about that humanity, right? And making sure I see theirs so that I can continue to hold my own.
That's great. That's hard to do with social media sometimes, so we appreciate that answer. We have a lot of questions, but probably only have time for about one more. So I'm going to try to take us out on a high note here, thinking about the future and where we go and how we can continue to have this conversation. So, when you have all of that kind of hate from social media, or it feels like a dark time sometimes, how do all of you kind of keep your focus on staying positive and thinking about different strategies to support trans student athletes? So maybe just if each of you could kind of respond to that and how you're trying to look ahead about how you can continue to do this in the future, that would be great.
I'll jump in. So I think, one of the things that I try to do is really kind of hold tightly to our core value, which is community, right? And doing all the work that engages in that. I think what has also been important for me is to continue to unlearn the ways in which misogyny perpetuates itself in athletic spaces, right? And so that I can push against that, because if I'm not aware, then I'm not pushing back, right? So I think those are just some simple ways, and ultimately want to make sure that our student athletes who come through our department leave feeling like it was a great place, it was a great experience, and they could truly be themselves.
Yeah, Miriam, I'll build off that. The student athletes and the students that I have the opportunity to be surrounded by day in and day out truly inspire me. And when you can weave that together with the stories that each of them have and the stories we can learn from folks like Skylar and others in this inclusion forum, it just inspires me to keep doing the right things right. And Skylar, right? You're right. You don't get dragged down by those haters out there. But there's always a thread in there that we can learn from, and I try to learn from that and continue to be inspired by those folks who are trying to do the right things right. And the good news is we're surrounded by a heck of a lot of them. And I thank the NCAA for the opportunity to kind of bring us all together to have this conversation over the past 2 days. It's been truly inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah, I think, what when I think about the future, I think about a place where this education is no longer necessary. I spend all day, every day from 7 a.m. until midnight working on trans inclusion, trans education, trans literacy. And I love my job. Believe me, I do. Today, I'm actually on campus at Nike with a bunch of trans kids, and we're talking about trans athletes in sports with these children, and it's so beautiful. But here's the thing that I've observed this morning. These kids, they're all here because they're all trans and they all like sports, and Nike brought them here because of that. But their transness isn't like the first thing about them. They're just kids, and they're just laughing and they're playing together and they're just being kids, and they happen to be trans. And that's why we're all in this space together, and we're all trans and we're all here, but they're just being kids. And I literally had to hold back tears because they don't even get how meaningful this experience is for them, because they're 10. And that to me makes it all the more meaningful. And the reason I'm sharing this with you all in close is that's what I want for us in the world. I want more of that kind of joy where our identities are present and are beautiful, but we get to just be ourselves, right? Both are true. I get to be trans openly so, and that can be beautiful and celebrated. And we're, making things with trans colors and trans rainbows. And I made a shirt that said trans athlete on it, but we're not that's not only all who we are, right? And so what I keep on thinking about that, how can we expand? How can we see people as all the humans that they are? But the thing is, the answer to my question that I've come to is, in order for other people to really see my humanity, they have to see their own. And people rob themselves of their own humanity when they start to say, oh, you don't belong here. Oh, you don't belong here. Oh, you don't belong here. Right. And so I actually encourage you all to invite yourselves into your own humanity, because that's really all we need for everybody to do to be able to be all humanity or all humans together. I think that I wanted to address, because I saw something in the chat really quickly, Gretchen, and then we'll have to wrap up, I know. But I know that there have been a lot of questions in the Q&A. I haven't been able to read them at the same time while answering things about harmful policies. And I want to just say sort of a general answer, because I know, Gretchen, that you encouraged me to really share what I think. There are a lot of harmful policies about trans athletes right now. And this conversation was intentionally not specific to those policies, because that is what I do day in and day out. And it is also not something the NCAA necessarily can change completely. And I know that there are people working very hard within the NCAA to try to make sure that they can be as inclusive as possible, but it's not actually, unfortunately, as simple as just creating an inclusive policy. I say this with a very heavy heart. Believe me, this directly impacts my life and all the people that I love. And it's really difficult because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people and a lot of systems of rules that are out there. And we need people to really invest in people's humanity first. And that's why we focus this inclusion forum session on humanity and on my humanity as a trans person and as a trans athlete. Because yes, we could sit here and talk about the policies all day, and we can talk about the negative impacts that they have, and they are vast and they are deep, and they are killing people. There are far higher suicide rates, for example, in states right now that have anti-trans policies. But we were trying to focus, and this is really important, on actual humanity here. Because if we could, like I said, spend all the time on all these rules, and that's valuable too. And I'm not trying to say that it's not. In fact, I spend most of my other days doing that. But the goal here was to really focus on my humanity. So I really, really appreciate the people who are asking questions about those rules. And I appreciate even trying to call in on the NCAA on this. And I think the NCAA appreciates that. But I want you all to understand that situating ourselves in the humanity of these stories is actually more important than understanding all of the intricacies of the policies, because we need to start there, and then we can redo the policies. And we should, believe me, a lot of these policies need to be completely redone. I agree. But if we don't understand the people, the humanity of the people that we are trying to educate, trying to advocate for, then we're lost to start. The resource I wanted to share with you all to close is Lane Changer. I said it earlier, but this is a gender literacy learning platform. It has 40 plus Q&A modules that range from how is biological sex not binary, which I know was one of the questions I couldn't answer. How can I be a better ally? Is being trans a phase? It does address directly policies about trans athletes, talks about biological sex, talks about what about detransitioners, people who are regretful of transition. What about coming out? All of these things can be answered in this Lane Changer learning series. So I encourage you to check it out. You just go to lanechanger.com. The chat, it's in the chat as well. And that's a way that you can continue your allyship, because this is a way for you to really get learning on these topics so that you can dive into the humanity as well, because it's all presented by me through storytelling. So it shouldn't be boring, hopefully, and you'll get to keep learning. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. If you're at an institution, you can buy it for your institution. There are licenses for schools, for businesses, etc. So I encourage you to check that out. And I'm so grateful that the NCAA created space for this conversation. And I'm so grateful for all the 200 plus of you that actually came and listened. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sorry we are right at time, so we have to close to get to the next session, but thank you so much to our panelists for today. Great questions in the chat. As Skylar said, we could talk about this for hours and hours, and there is much to continue to discuss related to policies and other areas as well. Thank you for tuning into this session. Please feel free to complete the session survey afterwards and stay tuned for more education on this. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.